Richard Escobedo.
Thanks, Chair Powell. I'm Richard Escobedo with CBS News. I want to look outside the U.S. about what's happening outside our shores and how it impacts the U.S. Canada's Prime Minister said last week that there's been a rupture in the global order, and I wonder how you're thinking about geopolitical risk as it relates to the U.S. economy.
So I can't comment on that speech or statement or anything like that. You know, geopolitical risk for us is a lot of it is around energy, oil, and so far we haven't. You know, for all the turmoil, oil prices have come down, as you know, and so we don't really see much. You know, longer than that, it's trade, and you know, the trade, the economy, our economy has pulled through pretty well, you'd have to say, given the very significant changes in trade policy. The U.S. economy has pushed right through. Partly that is that the way that what was implemented was significantly less than what was announced at the beginning. In addition, other countries didn't retaliate, and in addition, a good part of it hasn't been passed through to consumers yet. It's being taken by companies that stand between the consumer and the exporter. So that's where that is.
Jennifer.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Jennifer Schonberger with Yahoo Finance. With third quarter GDP growing at 4.4% and the fourth quarter expected to have a 5 handle on it as to what the Atlanta Fed is predicting, at a time when you had a government shutdown and we thought that was going to shave off some growth, you've also got the fiscal tailwinds you've talked about, big tax refunds coming, potential tariff dividend. How could you cut rates and not spur inflation in that environment?
Well, we didn't cut rates today, but you know, it depends on how fast potential output is growing, right? I'm just asking in principle. I'm not saying this is what's happening, but you know, there's growth and there's how fast the potential is growing, and at a time of you know, high productivity growth, potential output is rising. So it really matters whether potential output is growing as fast as actual output, and it would matter over time. The numbers you cite were for quarters, and quarterly GDP is. You need to look at 12 months because quarterly GDP can be very lumpy. You know, GDP was negative in the first quarter last year. So the overall, over the year, the numbers were nothing like that. You know, it was more in the mid-2s for the year.
And how do you explain the divide right now between strong economic growth and the job market? Is it productivity that's filling the gap? And is productivity being driven by AI at this point?
So there has been, you're right, there has been a divide of solid growth, but what looked like a weakening labor market. And that can be explained by rising productivity. But I would say we do see signs of, certainly of the unemployment rate stabilizing. So it may be we're seeing the beginning of the resolution of those two things. Also, as you probably know, the lore is that when GDP and the labor market get into an argument, in the end, the labor market data is more reliable. GDP data is very hard to collect and understand, but nonetheless, I think we may be seeing that tension resolving a little bit. Too soon to say with any confidence, though.
Matt Egan with CNN. Chair Powell, after today, you have 2 meetings left as Fed chair. You've obviously experienced a lot during your time as Fed chair, served under multiple presidents. I'm wondering what advice you have for whoever your successor might be.
Honestly, I'd say a couple of things. One is you know, stay out of elected politics. Don't get pulled into elected politics. Don't do it. And that's another thing. Well, another is that, you know, our window into democratic accountability is Congress. And it's not a passive burden for us to go to Congress and talk to people. It's an affirmative, regular obligation. If you want democratic legitimacy, you earn it by your interactions with our elected overseers. And so it's something you need to work hard at, and I have worked hard at it. So, and the last thing is, you know, it's easy to criticize government institutions so many ways. I will tell whoever it is, you're about to meet the most qualified group of people you not only have ever worked with, you will ever work with. And when you meet Fed staff, and not everybody's perfect, but there isn't a better cadre of professionals more dedicated to the public well-being than work at the Fed.
Thanks for that answer. If I may follow up, as I'm sure you've noticed, gold and silver prices have experienced historic gains of late. And I'm wondering how much attention, if any, you pay to those moves and what message you may take from these significant price increases we've seen for precious metals.
Don't take much message macroeconomically. The argument can be made that we're losing credibility or something. It's simply not the case. If you look at where inflation expectations are, our credibility is right where it needs to be. So we look at those things. We don't get spun up over particular asset price changes, although we do monitor them, of course.
Nicole, for the last question.
Hi, Nicole Goodkind, Barron's. Some prominent critics have charged that the Fed's economic models are somewhat backward-looking, but should be more forward-looking, incorporating things like productivity increases from AI. How do you incorporate current and future developments into your analysis and decision-making, and do you have an answer to those critics?
Yeah, so by and large, those criticisms, as somebody on the inside, they just don't make sense, and I'll tell you why. Every FOMC participant writes down a forecast every quarter, right? The summary of economic projections, and that's the basis for how we think about the economy. So, and the other thing is, what an economic model can do is it can grind up all the data for the last number of years, 50 years, let's say, and it can identify what are the relationships between variables A, B, C, D, and all that kind of thing. And it can tell you if you change one of those variables, this is what should happen in the macroeconomy. That's just the way it works. However, the structure of the macroeconomy is constantly changing. For example, we hadn't had a pandemic in 100 years. It wasn't in the model, and we knew it from the very beginning. It was not in the model. A trade war of this scope, we'd never had that in 100 years. And so there's great uncertainty at different points. Another thing I'll say is, when it comes to, technological developments that raise potential output, some kind of technological revolution, like happened in the 90s here and like maybe happening now with AI, we're all over that. And, everyone studies those periods, and, we're very clear-eyed about the possibility that this higher productivity may persist, and also that it may not. We're not. No one's sitting here unaware of the possibility of higher productivity. We've been talking about it for 3 years. It long predates the current situation. It's been going on for 5 or 6 years. We've had productivity higher. We've been talking about it that whole time. So it's very much on our minds, and we are well aware that higher productivity means higher potential output, and it changes the way you think about potentially inflation, growth, labor market, and all those things. That's all in our models. I mean, if it's just a question of using better models, bring them on. Where are they? We'll take them. But I think, we certainly are in contact with anybody who does economic modeling, and we're always looking to do better at that. But that's how I think about that.
And just a quick follow-up. We've been talking a lot about tariffs and passing through, and we've been talking a lot about them for the past few months. The trade landscape is still in a constant state of flux. Announcements, threats, negotiations, they're all frequently changing. So I'm wondering how you actually track these, what data or channels are most critical to follow this in real time.
Trade?
Yeah, the impact of tariffs and how they're changing.
Yeah, I think our staff has done a really nice job on that, and they've kind of put it together in real time. So as I mentioned, a tariff gets put in place, you can pretty much track its effects on pricing and on everything, and so you build a model up from all of the tariffs. At the beginning, it was very much of a forecast. Now it's every cycle that goes by, it becomes more informed by actual data, and our forecasts were not far off. What changed was, as I think I said earlier, what was implemented was smaller than what was announced. In addition, we didn't see retaliation internationally, and I think people did generally expect that because we saw that in the past, and that really mattered too. And then the other thing is that pass-through, didn't know how fast that was going to be to consumers, didn't know how much exporters would take, how much companies in the middle would take, and how much the consumer would take. And it turns out it's a lot of companies in the middle who, by the way, are pretty strongly committed to passing the rest of it through, which is one of the reasons why we need to keep our eye on inflation and not declare victory prematurely.
Thank you.
We're done?
We're done.
Okay. Thank you very much.